I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners to order for Tuesday, July 24th, 2018. And the first item on the agenda is adjustments to the agenda, and I understand we're going to pull item 6C2 from the consent calendar for discussion.
Is that the above-ground storage tank? Yeah, great, thanks.
Thank you for sending that note out beforehand. And I'll remind commissioners that if you do think you're going to need to pull a consent calendar item, it's always good to give us advance notice so we can make sure staff is here. Also, I want to remind commissioners that we have a 2-hour exec session we're going to try and get through this morning, so we need to get through our regular items fairly quickly.
It's going to take longer than that.
Yeah. So with that, are there any other adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move on to public comment. And I have one person signed up for public comment, Tom Wright. If you want to come on up and I'll state your name and where you're from, and I'll start your 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Tom Wright. I'm from Eugene. I'm with Wright Lumber. It's a company. I was here a couple weeks ago introducing myself and kind of some background on Wright Lumber. I'm interested in the Dexter rural property, the rural industrial. There is a proposal before the board, and at 1:30, Jeff Turk will present that. I just wanted to add that in this time period, I've been working hard on some of my hurdles to leasing the property. I think I have a lot of good ideas on how to solve those issues to put us in a position to even potentially lease as is. I'd like to put that out there because it's kind of a moving target a little bit, but I think that some of the work I've done will provide very fruitful to maybe get me, move us along into leasing. I will be at the 1:30 meeting, so if you have any questions then, I'll be available. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So that's everyone we have signed up for public comment today. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board? Seeing none, then we'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other issues or remonstrance. Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And real quickly, Mr. Wright, you had called and left me a message last week. I was out of town, so that's the reason why you didn't get a return call back. But I knew we were going to be discussing this item this afternoon, but I just wanted to make sure that you understood that I was out of town last week, and that's the reason why you didn't get a call back from me. So, yeah, and I was in Victoria, Canada, which even really was going to be much tougher. So, and then real quickly, I don't know if folks saw, but last week an article, I think it was last week, or maybe actually it was a little longer than that, maybe about a month ago, interesting article came out, again, technology and how technology is just changing drastically in all business ventures. And I don't know if you saw it, so McDonald's announced that they will have self-serving kiosks in every one of their restaurants beginning in 2020 in the United States. And I thought that was interesting. They also, in the article, you went down and talked about that because of impacts of labor costs, minimum wage, healthcare costs, that sometime after that they expect to be completely cashiered-less at one point in the near future. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and it just, again, shows you how quickly business adapts to maybe decisions that government makes. And that was yet another classic example, and this coming from McDonald's. I just thought it was interesting, but self-serving kiosks, that won't bother me a bit, and so I almost look forward to that. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, Smoker Heisky, I spent a few days at the National Association of Counties meeting, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. It was pretty eventful. I represented Lane County there, and a couple of things happened that were of note. One thing is that we continued to move forward on CFR 42, which is adjustment of the release of information surrounding behavioral health treatment to bring it more in line with the HIPAA. That passed through the National Health Steering Committee unanimously. Some questions, in fact, some fairly detailed questions that were answerable and answered, and it also passed the full board. So that is moving forward as an item on NACO's agenda, the adjustments to the CFR 42, which is a code of regulations surrounding disclosure of treatment information for men and women with behavioral health issues. It's a big step in the right direction. I'd like to, we've been working on it for 4 years. I carried it 4 years ago. Commissioner Sorensen carried it, I believe, 2 years ago. And the third time was a charm, and it went through this time. The second was that I had an opportunity to panel on jail diversion, on the justice system jail diversion efforts throughout the nation. It's interesting that the three panelists were me from Lane County, Dr. Chad Koyanaga, who is the psychiatrist for Honolulu County, and Chief Justice Maxine White, who, Mr. Mokraheiski, I believe you serve with in Milwaukee County. They had great perspectives, one from a healthcare professional's point of view, one from a Chief Justice's point of view, and the third from one who was able to, I hope, adequately represent the many professionals in Lane County who make our FUSE system work, the Frequent User System Engagement Program. And I was able to talk about the elements of our FUSE program, the pilot program, which was so successful, and the continuation of FUSE, which includes adding residential beds for people with behavioral health issues. A lot of questions surrounding that. That particular panel was well attended, I think around 250 people in attendance, and many questions, mostly regarding the county perspective as opposed to the justice perspective and the professional perspective. So it went very well. I had a chance to make some other contacts when I was back there, and I'll give a full report to the board chair later this week. Thank you.
Any other remonstrance? See none, then we're on to emergency business. Any emergency business today?
No.
And that gets us then down to item 5, employee recognition. Mr. Mokraheiski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to invite our guests here from Financial Services to come join me. I'll give up my seat and move down. I think we have enough seats here for everybody. This is a team of ours from Financial Services, and I'm really pleased. First, I think what I'm going to do.
Steve, if you could pull the mic towards you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm going to hand out these certificates, and I'm going to read. First, this says, this certificate is presented to each of these individuals on this 24th day of July, 2018, in recognition of the receiving of the top honor of the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 15th year, and providing the Lane County community with transparent and accountable financial information. This one is for Jeannie and for Robert Tintle. Robert, of course, is our financial services manager. Jeannie is our financial reporting supervisor. Jana Beckett, to the second to the last over here, is our senior accounting clerk. Andrew B. Miller is our financial services supervisor, and then Stacy Brady, last but certainly not least, is our accounting analyst in financial services. So I just have a few comments here. This is an incredible team in financial services who, and oftentimes underappreciated. We talk a lot in the public forum about our budget process and about the process that we go through in establishing where the limited resources we collect from our community are invested each year. We don't always talk about how we manage those resources once they've been approved by the board to be spent. And Lane County, so this award that we've received, Lane County has been awarded for 15 years, the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA. They also provide, we for 14 or 15 years have received the Distinguished Budget Award. Christine, 15, 14? 14 years. We've received the Distinguished Budget Award from GFOA. For 15 years, we've received this Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. So GFOA, this is the GFOA of the United States and Canada. It's been awarded for fiscal year 2016-17 for our CAFA. You've heard us talk about our comprehensive annual financial report. This is the highest form of recognition in government, accounting, and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by Lane County government and its staff. The county's CAFR Hey, did I say CAFA? CAFA is our state funding for assessment taxation. CAFR is, of course, our government, our comprehensive annual financial report. So it represents significant achievement by Lane County. And our CAFR is one of the most important published documents by the county each year. And again, we don't talk about it enough. When Moss Adams does our annual financial audit, they oftentimes will refer to the CAFR, and that is in part because the audits, the independent auditors, report on the county's financial statements and internal controls are included in the CAFR. But it's one of the most important published documents by the county each year. It includes detailed information about the financial position and results of operations of the county and provides accountability for the use of county resources. So again, we have this very public process in the establishment of our budget, and then we have our budget document that we receive awards for 14 years on. And the CAFR in our budget document is the statement about how we're going to spend, looking forward, how we're going to spend our resources. The CAFR is really a report on how did we do in the expenditure of those funds. It's the accounting, the transparent accounting of how we have utilized our resources, those public resources. So the award was established in 1945 by GFOA to encourage, this is a quote, to encourage and assist state and local governments to go beyond the minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principles to prepare comprehensive annual financial reports that evidence the spirit of transparency and full disclosure. It's as if they wrote that speaking about Lane County, and so much of what we do has really been focused on making sure that we're presenting information to the public and to taxpayers in an open and transparent manner. And I just couldn't be more pleased with this team, and I'm really pleased that we have the ability to bring you forward in a public forum, because so much of this work happens rather quietly. And we don't celebrate the great work of these folks because they're oftentimes dealing with the back end of after we've said how we're going to spend our money. They're doing that. And I will make a note about GFOA as a nonprofit professional association serving more than 18,000 government finance professionals throughout the United States and Canada. So this is a large organization, national organization that recognizes state and local governments for excellence in financial reporting, and it shouldn't be a surprise that for 15 years Lane County has received this award, but it's about time that we brought these great folks who do that work in front of you and to the rest of our organization and the public, and gave you a big thanks for the great work that you do. So thank you so much. And Robert, if Robert, you'd like to say anything in addition to that, please feel free.
First, I will say that Stacy was recently promoted to accountant position, so a new promotion for her, so thank you for that. And yes, we are excited about this 15th anniversary, and so thank you for this time to just bring this forward. We made this commitment, the county did, starting in 2003, to go beyond the basic financial statements that are required and to produce a comprehensive annual financial report, as Mr. Mokrahajski mentioned, to increase transparency and accountability, and that's really what we do. I also want to thank all the departments. We depend on a lot of information coming from the departments, and then of course staff, literally hundreds and hundreds of hours, evenings and weekends, for producing this document annually, and so thank you for all your hard work on that as well.
Commissioner Leighton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as Chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, it's, and with Commissioner Farr also serving as a voting member along with our Assessor Mike Coles, the one thing we get to hear and actually get to talk about and have a good discussion is when Moss Adams does present. And I must tell you, so Steve, I just really appreciate your comments at the very beginning. And because I think what happens here is the work that you do at times gets unnoticed, or the public doesn't quite understand. And when we were going through those brutal cuts that we were in my first 2 years on the board, and along with Commissioner Sorensen, the one thing that we talked about was that maybe our day-to-day budgeting was being challenged because of the lack of timber funds and what we had to do with reorganization. But the one thing is our investment portfolio remains strong. We never saw a drop in credit rating. And of course, now we've seen an increase in credit rating, the highest in the Lane County's history. But that, to me, signifies in really the work that you do. And I just want to, again, say thank you very, very much. And before Robert got here, when Mike was in charge, that was the one thing we talked about a lot, is that maybe our day-to-day budget was being challenged, but the investment portfolio remains strong. And that's because of the work that you do. And I just want to say, I just want to say thank you very much for that. And because it was something that we got to talk about quite a bit, that when we were out talking with constituents, that, yeah, we're being challenged because of maybe the annual budget. But if you look at the strength of our investment portfolio, Lane County still remains very, very strong. And so on behalf of the in my role as Chair of Finance and Audit, I just want to say thank you very much. And we really appreciate the work that Moss Adams does, but it also shows the work that you do, because they go through and just verify what you've already done. And I just want to say thank you very much for your great work and over the years, not just this year, last year, but over the years. Excellent work. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Only briefly, I think Commissioner Lycan touched on the main points. Ms. Smoker-Heiske, you said that they do their work quietly, and that's been my understanding through the work on the financial audit, hearing Moss Adams report, that quiet is a good thing in finance. So good job, and we need to shout from the mountaintop how good a job you are doing, in fact. That is it's heralded by a 15-year anniversary of excellence, and also by the fact that I write down quotes. And Robert, we began using a comprehensive, and you stressed comprehensive, annual financial report to assure transparency. Good job. Thank you very much.
And I'll just real quick say thank you. And what I really want to appreciate is the work that you all do that keeps us transparent to the public. And it's not just the CAFR, which is an important piece, and people started to focus on back in about the early 2000s, for all organizations. You'd hear, radio talk shows talking about people's CAFRs. And it's like, what is that? So people started paying attention to what they are, because it kind of does have that snapshot of the entire organization's finances in one report. But also the transparency work you guys do just on the internet, posting all of our transactions on a monthly basis of every checkbook transaction we have, every credit card transaction, every deposit. We're as transparent as you can be financially to the public. And that's because of the work you guys are doing. The CAFR is a piece of that, and you're being recognized for the 15th year in a row. I wish there was an award for the best, transparency in actual transaction, display for the public, that you guys could also get. I don't think there is one, but, if you get, anyone that wants to look at Lane County's checkbook and really understand, look for those places where we're buying the $1,000 toilet seat or the $400 hammer, and you won't find them, but you can look for that. Which it wasn't necessarily an easy thing to do in the past. And you guys have made it easy for the public and any watchdog group to look at our finances and verify that, we're being open, transparent, and honest in our financial reporting. And that's really, this award recognizes that for one particular report, but there's so much else you all do. So I just want to appreciate that work that you guys do of keeping our finances straight, but also the transparency work that you do. So thank you very much for your work.
Congratulations, Stacy.
So with that, we are moving on to the consent calendar, and these are items that are considered to be routine by the Board of Commissioners and will be enacted in a single motion in the form listed below. If you want more detail, you can go to our website in the agenda and click the view material on each item to get the detail. If desired, items will be removed from the consent calendar, like Commissioner Sorensen pulled item 6C2. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar less item 6C2. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion to approve the consent calendar minus 6C2.
Second?
That's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Williams. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Then we'll bring up item 6C2 that was pulled from the consent calendar. And Dan, if you want to come forward. Yep. And I'll turn it over to Commissioner Sorensen. You have a-
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank Mr. Mokrahysky and all involved for coming today to answer a few questions. I think mostly what the board needs to know is that we're being asked to approve a contract in the amount of $226,577.33 to supply and install an above-ground fuel storage tank at the Glenwood Transfer Station. And from what I understand, the reason we're doing that is among other things, number one, the DEQ, the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, has been in contact with the county regarding some underground storage tank issues. And the remedy for that is to install an above-ground storage tank. And my concern was, number one, what was the underlying, no pun intended, underlying, what was the subterranean problem that gave rise to the DEQ thing in the first place? And secondly, whether or not this was going to be a capital cost that would be something that would improve the value of the property, and if the group in Springfield that was moving ahead with their plan for an indoor track facility, and if the Glenwood site was one of the sites that they were considering, whether this capital improvement would, be a commitment for many, many years. And at least via staff, I've learned that, we have to do this, A, because of the DEQ problem, and secondly, that the above-ground storage tank can be moved, and it isn't, it's a capital expense, but it's not like we can't take some of it with us. So I've just kind of given my version of this, and I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hurley to kind of give more detail.
Sure thing. Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, and I think it makes sense to talk about this. Why would we invest in a large capital project on that site when we're considering possibly moving away from that site? So the reasons are twofold. One was that we have to because of the Department of Environmental Quality and concerns for the integrity of that tank. It's not leaking to our knowledge at this point, but there are concerns about that it could in the future. And I brought Jeff Bishop here, who's been working with DEQ for the last couple of years on this project, as well as Jeff Orlandini, our interim waste management manager. So there's that issue. And then the second issue is going from an underground tank to an above ground tank, is that if we do move in the future, we could move that tank. We'd have to build another foundation for it and the plumbing, and of course, but the tank itself could be moved for at a future site. So Jeff, do you want to talk about the compliance issues of the cathode protection or whatever? I don't know, without getting into too much detail.
Hi, I'm Jeff Bishop, Waste Management. It's been my pleasure to be the tank whisperer for a number of years now, so I can't answer most of your questions. The immediate issue is that the tank as installed, so this is what's called in the industry a Type 3 tank, so that's a standard construction. It's still in use today. So that's a welded steel tank. It's double-walled with an interstitial space between the two walls for secondary containment. The tank has anti-corrosion protection applied to it before it's buried. It's a multi-coat spray application. And then it also has a cathodic protection system, which consists of some sacrificial anodes like you'd find on a ship. So they're basically zinc anodes that are sacrificial. So those are tested every 3 years. The tank was installed in '89, and we have those in the cathodic protection system inspected every 3 years, and that's a regulatory requirement. So in the most recent test we were due in February, we found out that the anode's not gone, but it's out of tolerance. so it's time to replace that anode. So the testing company is required to notify DEQ when they do these tests and whether it's a pass-fail. So they notify DEQ, they schedule the time to come down and talk with us and look at those tanks and kind of do an assessment. So repair of that anode is a replacement is an option. We can do that. The tanks are otherwise in compliance, although we are relying on some grandfathering to accomplish that. And if you want to talk about the interstitial space monitoring, we can go there for sure. But
We're experts at filling that kind of space. Yeah. No, thank you. That's really what we needed to hear.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think, Jeff Verlini, interim waste management manager, so I think where we're at is we could definitely do a fix on this. That fix would probably be under $14,000 to go in there, do that repair. We could continue, monitoring the system. We spend somewhere $6,000 to $8,000 a year on maintenance and checking because of the nature of this tank, whereas above ground, you don't need to do that. We have constant issues with our dispensers as well, where, when we fuel up and get those refilled in the ground, then we can't fuel our trucks for a number of hours. So for us, replacing it with a system that, much like our scale system, that we can then take with us. So there's maybe, I would say, 50 feet of trenching we might do to get lines to go from where the above ground to the new dispensers would be. That's the only thing you wouldn't take with you. Everything else, dispensers, all the tanks would come with us to the new facility. Wouldn't add value to the price of the property. We will have to decommission those old tanks at some point regardless when we leave. So one of the advantages to this was to spend some money to replace them, and then we can spend the money to decommission later and kind of spread that out as opposed to doing full meal deal in the same year.
What is the timeline for the removal of the tanks, underground tanks?
So we don't have a timeline from that. Our understanding with DEQ is that if we stop using them, then they no longer need to have the regular testing, and then we would submit to them a plan to decommission. We'd either look at doing that in the next fiscal year or after to decommission.
Was there ever any fine or any threat from DEQ?
There currently is that if we do not fix the anode or replace the tanks, that then a fine would happen. They've been very generous in working with us to give us the timeline to install the new ones if that's the route we go without fines.
So no fine as of now?
As of now, we'd be looking at a fine probably November, December-ish if we didn't do anything.
Okay. Well, I think unless there's other questions from commissioners, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second?
So it's been moved to approve item 6C2 and by Commissioner Sorensen and seconded by Commissioner Lyken. Discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
That moves us on to county administration announcements. Mr. Mokahysky.
Mr. Chair, we can move to item B, and then I'm happy to, once we get through that, since we have 2 or 3 folks here
Okay.
for that one.
Then we'll move on to item 7B, which is a work session in the matter of reviewing the road fund reserve and secure rural school fund spending plan and financial policies on order of funds expended. And we have Christine Moody and Tanya Heaton here. So if you want to go ahead and.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Dan
Wasn't
Hurley
sure-
is here
I wasn't
too, but
sure if
he's in
Dan
the
was gonna
audience.
be-
Yeah, he said he'll sit back there, but if
Okay.
we need him, he can come up for questions. So I'll just briefly go through the memo, and then I'll share that we went to Finance and Audit last week, and I have information on that wasn't available at the time that I drafted this memo, so I'll verbally share that. So this is revisiting an issue that actually came up during Budget Committee, and maybe starting with the fact that we received a renewal of Secure Rural Schools funding, a 2-year renewal, those funds going into the road fund and the general fund. So we're specifically discussing the road fund portion here. And as the board is well aware, there is a difference in what the funding from SRS or timber funds can be spent on versus state gas tax. Both of those funds are constitutionally required to go into the road fund. And in the past, they haven't been tracked in a separate way as far as what they were being spent on. But the Secure Rural Schools can be spent on patrolling county roads. One additional piece is that the Secure Rural Schools funding has been treated as one-time money, at least the last 3 to 4 years with our last 2 renewals. So that is why during the Budget Committee process, the Budget Committee received a plan that Public Works came forward with to spend that one-time Secure Rural Schools money on some specific projects. The issue that then came up was related to the reserve. Commissioner Bozovich had brought up that he wanted to look at the possibility of reserving those Secure Rural Schools funds and instead spending existing reserves on these projects, kind of swapping the 2 sources. That would enable us to have the most discretionary funds available in the reserve in the future. So that's a brief summary of what that proposal was. The memo indicates that we went to Finance and Audit on July 19th. There was also 2 other options given to Finance and Audit. One of them was to look at whether we should instead reserve Secure Rural Schools money and hold off on some of the projects that were being proposed. And then the third option, of course, was to go with the current plan and do nothing and not change what's currently in the 18-19 budget. So Finance and Audit, after quite a bit of discussion, they had some concern about option 2, the one that would delay projects, the financial impacts of that, because delaying road projects means that they're going to cost more down the road. So they really didn't want that to be considered very much, unless it was, looking at some very specific smaller projects within there. So they actually moved and approved for option 1 to swap those funds, but to also track Secure Rural Schools funding in a sub-fund of the road fund. So as I mentioned, constitutionally, we have to put it into the road fund. We can't put it into another special revenue fund, but we do have ways of tracking that Secure Rural Schools timber money, if it becomes timber money, again, separately, so that we could definitely see what funds were left after transferring money to patrol, which we do right now with the operating money. We do about $1 million a year. What will become reserves, because it wouldn't be spent on projects. And then we do have some dues that are really timber related that you can't spend gas tax on. And Tanya Heaton can share more about those if there's questions, but we would also track those expenses going out so that we would see the balance there. So I don't know if Steve or Tanya want to add anything, or if we just want to open up to questions. Okay, let's open up for questions.
Questions from the board? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Thanks for taking the time to give us a good discussion last Thursday at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting. And thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, for your recommendation, which came through the Finance and Audit Committee, which uses the more restricted funds first and allowing less restricted funds to be more available later down the road, whether or not they're used for different things. It seemed a prudent way to handle the funds. And Tanya, boy, out of thin air, you already had a fund ready to use, and by the end of the meeting, I stayed behind after the meeting was over and waited for 5 minutes while you guys discussed how it was going to work, and it was a joy. It's like a poetry in motion listening to you guys make that work. So very well done. And Commissioner Bozovich and Ms. Mogrohajski, we did recommend maintaining the current schedule for repairs and maintenance that are prescribed in the budget. We can address it later if it becomes necessary, but because of the workforce, because of the direction that's already been taken, we thought that it was more prudent once again to stay with the existing budget. So thanks for a great report, and thank you once again for taking the time, because not everything is as clear as day to people who listen to the work that you do when you describe the work you do. Thank you.
I Actually, sorry, can I add one more thing that I
Sure.
want to hit on, is the reserve, because that also got, the reserve levels within the road fund got talked about a bit at Finance and Audit, I should have mentioned, is that the concern from Public Works financial staff, of course, is that reserve level that the board has recently, May 1st, adopted a 45% reserve requirement in the road fund. So there was a bit of discussion about what if, when in the future, if there was a decision to pull down reserves for patrol, what would that look like for the road fund? So, it was acknowledged that that would, if that decision was made, there would also be a reserve discussion at the same point, because there is this policy out there that keeps that 45%. And so the plan to replenish or all those other pieces that would weave in wouldn't be forgotten if that decision was made in the future.
And we recognize that future commissions would have that option. It would
Right.
be beyond our control at
Exactly.
that point in time.
Yes, yes.
Any other questions for staff? So I just want to thank you all for, looking at the options and bringing them through Finance and Audit. My intent was never to change the schedule for the projects and to continue the proposed projects. It was just a matter of which dollars got spent first, and not to change the reserve policies either, just to make sure that what we were keeping in reserve was the most flexible money possible. So if in the future a board had some exigency that they needed to deal with, they had the most flexible funds available in reserves to deal with those exigencies. And that's really what I was after, was just to provide the maximum flexibility to the organization financially in the future, not to change the capital plan, not to change the use of that one, sort of using that one-time money to shore up reserves and then taking that less flexible money to spend as one-time investments in place of that one-time congressionally approved secure rural schools payments. That's really what I was after, and I think the recommendation that came out of Finance and Audit matches what I was looking for, which is, full speed ahead on doing some of those projects, just to account for it in a way that clearly documents that what we have left in reserve is that most flexible money, and not really to change the reserve policies and not really to propose spending reserves at this time. It was just a matter of just making sure some future board down the road, could clearly look back and document that that reserve money was the most flexible money, and it offers them a little bit more options later, because we faced the issues when we were trying to make all the cuts back in 2011, 12, and 13, that we couldn't say how much of the road fund was the reserves were federal forest dollars and how much was gas tax dollars, clearly. And that led to some quite difficult discussions and concerns, and in fact, at one time led to a lawsuit about whether or not we were spending road fund money that was state road fund money that is constitutionally restricted on patrol, or were we spending federal money? And I think that this will avoid those issues in the future, because we will be putting it into, at least coding it and tracking it separately to where it'll protect the county liability-wise too. So there's a secondary impact to that, is it will allow us to prevent that confusion of whether or not we're violating a constitutional restriction on the state funds. So I really appreciate the work of Finance and Audit looking at this, and I agree with the recommendation out of Finance and Audit to maintain the capital spending plan, but to track the SRS money and spend the state money first, so to speak, but to maintain all of our the existing road fund reserve policies, the 45%, and just to provide that long-term flexibility to future boards. So do you need direction from us, Christine?
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't draft a board order. This was a work session, but we definitely could do that and maybe want to do that to have it really clear for future boards. So I could send that back through on consent calendar with direction from the board.
Do I see 3 head nods for that? Yeah, I've seen 5. So I think you've got your direction to follow up on the Finance and Audit Committee's recommendation and come back with a board order.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this? Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I can jump back to item 7A, which is county administration announcements. Mr. Moker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a laundry list here, so I'll try to go quickly, and if you want me to stop or have questions, you let me know.
Okay.
First, we continue our meetings with departments and divisions across the organization. I've told you that we have 24 meetings set up with all of our teams throughout Lane County to roll out the new strategic plan. And so in the last couple of weeks, we've visited with technology services staff, developmental disabilities division, and parole and probation. And again, been really great opportunities to talk about our vision and goals for the future, our priorities and strategic objectives, as well as talk about some of those higher level things, our purpose, our new purpose statement to improve lives, our core behaviors of passion to serve and drive to connect and focus on solutions. So it's those continue to go really well. I want to call out, Dan Hurley is still here and Jeff Turk is here from Public Works. So I want to call out Public Works. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to go to the county fair last week, but for the last couple years, Public Works has had a number of booths that they've set up in the parking lot behind the Lane County History Museum. And this year, every year gets a little bit better, and this year was just phenomenal. So they have Safety Town, and they had an excavator out there and a dump truck. They had a little tricycle course for kids, put on a helmet, and they would race, and they learned sort of rules of the road on bikes. They had, some traffic safety things, and they had adults sign. I took my kids on Saturday, okay? So we went and experienced all this. It was the first thing that we did at the fair. Before we went and got on all the rides, we went over to the county section, and they signed a piece of paper about, their commitments to, if they're driving in a car with an adult, to remind the adult to go the speed limit. And then there were little certificates for adults to sign that I promised to, I commit to drive the speed limit, because the faster I drive, the greater risk I put myself and others at. Human Resources also had a booth, promoting various county positions and things. And there was a lot of things. And Dan was there, I think probably half the department over the 4 or 5 days of the fair volunteered their time and just did a fantastic job. But here's the other thing I would say. What a wonderful captive audience we have of families and children from throughout Lane County who come to the fair, and Public Works just did a phenomenal job of displaying some of the incredible things we do that the public, when they interact with, sometimes they're not always that happy if they're trying to rush to work and they've got to slow down because of a road project or paint that's being put on the road. And here we have an opportunity to grab families and young people and talk about the great work that we do, promote safety, and it just was phenomenal. So I could go on, but it was the highlight for me of my weekend, and also seeing my kids get up in the big dump truck and watch them raise the bed of the truck, and the big smiles on their faces. And there just were a ton of kids and families. I know the History Museum, Lane County History Museum, had like record attendance. 3,000. Over 3,000 people went through. So they have this passport that they give kids, and they go around to these different stations, and they get stamped, and then they get a little thing at the end of it. And one of the stops is the History Museum. So we've incorporated the History Museum, and they go on a scavenger hunt in the History Museum. So really, they'll find a way next year, I know, of making it better. I'm not sure how, because it really was just phenomenal. So hats off to Dan, to you and the whole team in Public Works. I know Kara Joras did a ton of work to coordinate all that. So I wanted to call that out.
Free popcorn was really popular on Senior Day.
popcorn, popsicles. It was really cool. All right.
Can I add one item?
Yeah.
If you want to see video of a 2-year-old operating heavy machinery and sitting in the Chief Justice chair from the old courthouse, I have both of those
Did
things.
you take your grandchild?
Ayali spent 7 hours at the fair.
Yeah.
And didn't go on one single ride other than the ones that you all provided.
Yeah. And that's the other great thing is sometimes the rides at the fair can be too much for those really young kids, and this was so accessible for everyone of all ages. All right, so we have to move on, but I could keep talking about that. I wanted to call out, the commissioners had another Public Works item for parks. We handed out these postcards, and we have 6 community meetings, 3 this week and 3 next week. So tonight in Veneta, Wednesday, tomorrow at the Lane County Public Works, and Thursday at the Leeburg Fire Station, then next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Tuesday at the Lowell Fire Station, Wednesday at Crestwell Community Center, and Thursday at the Siuslaw Valley Fire Station number 1. They're all at 5:30 p.m., so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, this week and next week, 5:30 p.m. in various locations. Go to lanecounty.org/parksplan. These are community forums to, now that we have our draft master plan for parks, to roll that out and hear from the community on that plan. So encourage people to attend, and certainly commissioners, if you're able to attend any of those. We have a new Parks Division manager that we're going to bring to you once he gets settled in the job, and we'll introduce to you. Okay, couple other quick items. I want to mention last Monday we had a great meeting with a number of rural police chiefs and police departments to discuss mental health mobile crisis response in rural Lane County. So the Florence police chief was there, the Coburg police chief, I believe, was there. Oak Ridge Police Department representative was there, our sheriff's department, all of our H&HS staff, talking about what we can do to improve mental health crisis response in rural communities that won't break the budget. So really great beginning of a conversation there, but I just want to call that out for the board. Karen Gaffney and the team in behavioral health and Health and Human Services led that and facilitated that discussion, but we're really looking at what we can do beyond the metro area of Eugene and Springfield to make sure we're providing mobile response for mental health crisis services in the rural areas. My second to last item I want to call out the United Way Loaned Executive Program. You know, every year we do our combined giving. Last year, Lane County, for the first time in several years, had we identified a loaned executive. Jeff Kincaid was the loaned executive, and he did a fantastic job, and I hear regularly from the United Way staff about how great Jeff was. So successful, we said, we really want to integrate this into our organization and make this part of not only our commitment to United Way in the Combined Giving campaign, but also to leadership development in our organization. It's a 3-month commitment for an employee to go over and participate in that, but a wonderful opportunity for an employee to network in the community, gain a better understanding of nonprofit organizations and services in the community, as well as to build their public speaking and communication skills and coordination and other things. So we've made a commitment to have an annual loaned executive from Lane County. Departments submit an employee who's interested, can talk to their supervisor, and then get submitted into a pool, and we identify an individual, and we've done that now. I'm really pleased to announce that Leilani Aldana is the individual, and so excited that Leilani is an employee in Trillium Behavioral Health. So she's a county employee in Trillium Behavioral Health, who was also hired in the last year from our diversity internship program. So she was one of the first individuals who went through our paid internship program to improve diversity in the workforce. She was hired through that program, and now she's going to be our loaned executive for next year. So we're excited about that, and we'll have an opportunity to introduce her to you soon. Finally, we have a meeting coming up with the Governor's Chief of Staff, Nick Blosser, asked to meet with a handful of counties. So Marion County Administrator, myself, I think possibly the Jackson County Administrator, and our assessors are going to meet with the governor's chief of staff to talk about CAFA. So I mentioned CAFA this morning. I was trying to say CAFR, but CAFA's on our minds because we piqued the governor's interest at a meeting a couple weeks ago that was intended to be around the PERS side account, but the CAFA funding came up. And the governor's chief of staff went back to the governor, had a conversation, and now they're interested in proposing some legislation this September to deal with CAFA funding for counties. So I just wanted to call that out for the board. We'll have that conversation with you in the near future, but we're scheduling that meeting to happen rather quickly because they're moving. I think it's a promising sign that for years we've been trying to bang the drum around CAFA funding for counties, and appreciate that the governor's chief of staff has heard that message, and we have an opportunity to partner on some legislation to address that critical funding for counties. So I'll share more information as that becomes available. Thanks. I know that was a lot, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry I missed the fair last week, but rumors in the air said you can still rock in America. Anybody get that one? Night Ranger was playing, of course, and featuring class of 1971 Elmira High School, Kelly Keegi, on the drums, who wrote a song about his little sister, Christy, called Sister Christian. Ended up being their biggest hit of all time.
Sister Christy when he originally wrote it.
Originally wrote it.
But one of the band
Yep.
members misheard it.
Yep.
Left it as Sister Christy.
Sister Christian, that's exactly right. So I heard they were great, but I've seen them several times before. So anyway,
Yep.
it sounded like the fair, though, was a great success yet again. Congratulations, Dan, and of course, our fair management group. Sounds like it was a great hit again. Congratulations.
I enjoyed it.
You like the pigs.
Yeah. Yep. They always have some animals there that like are newborns, and this last year it was baby goats. This year it was baby pigs, and nothing cuter than those little snouts on those baby pigs. Yep. Okay. So now we're down to county council announcements. I don't think there are any other than we do have a rather long exec session facing us. So with that, we'll move to commissioners' business. Any announcements from commissioners? Commissioner Lykin.
Yeah, real quickly. So ATV Task Force Subcommittee on Law Enforcement and Crash Reporting tomorrow will be our third meeting. The whole group has met now twice, continues to move forward, and with smoke permitting, I hate to say it that way, but we have an ONC meeting scheduled in Grants Pass on Friday, but we're kind of waiting to see if we're going to have it or not, because apparently the smoke down Douglas County and south is very similar to what we experienced last year. And just heard from Commissioner Freeman yesterday that it is a very high unhealthy level in Douglas County, so they're hoping the winds will come in and blow that out. So we're kind of waiting to hear to see if we're going to have a ONC meeting or not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other announcements? Commissioner Williams.
I'd just like to briefly extend my appreciation to the Eugene Symphony. I had the pleasure of Saturday night attending the symphony at the Cuthbert, and then, of course, last night in Cottage Grove, Bohemia Park. The symphony presented themselves to a large audience on a beautiful summer evening. They have three such venues each summer, and they have a very exciting program lineup for the coming months, and I'd encourage anybody and everybody to check into that. It's truly a gift that we have in our community to have great musicians. Francesco Lechichong is the conductor, and he does a great job. He's a very inspiring guy. He's just fun to watch, as are all of them. So encourage folks to take advantage of that.
Any other announcements? Just two quick ones. One is that the Mayor's Conference is in Florence starting on Thursday, and Thursday evening, the Mayor's Roundtable will be meeting, and I'll probably report back on that. I'll be attending. And then Friday is the 125-year celebration for the city of Florence, and they're having a block party in Old Town starting about 5:30. So if you want to go down to Old Town and celebrate 125 years on Friday evening and get away from the heat, be a good time. So with that, we're to agenda team request. Any agenda team request or work session requests from the board? Seeing none, then we will move into executive session, and we will probably recess from executive session and come back into regular session at 1:30 for our public works items. The Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations, to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions, to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed, and to review and evaluate the employment related performance of the chief executive officer of any public body, a public officer, employee, or staff member who does not request an open hearing. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-6602D, E, H, and I, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session, and we will be coming back out in a public session at 1:30. So we are recessed and will reconvene executive session in the Board of Commissioners conference room.